That morning, Napa Valley lay under a thin veil of mist, the sky only just beginning to lighten. This luxurious wine valley, famous for vineyards stretching all the way to the horizon, Mediterranean-style villas and extravagant weddings reserved for California's elite, was, for many people, a place that marked the most beautiful moments of their lives. But for Paige Marie Wilson, it would become the birthplace of a memory so painful, so cruel, and ultimately a turning point that would unravel an entire family. Paige had arrived long before she was expected, though she had no intention of attending the wedding. In fact, she wasn't even allowed to show up. All she wanted was to look at the place from afar, tell herself she'd finally moved past her family's chains, and leave quietly. Even though they had rejected her, even though she'd been labeled the disgrace of the Wilson bloodline, Paige still needed to see her younger sister's wedding with her own eyes. The sister she had once loved, raised, and protected through the entire passage of their youth. She drove her old, aging car along the gravel road leading to the gates of Silverado Crest, one of Napa's most expensive event venues. Luxury SUVs and limousines lined up behind one another, carrying elegantly dressed guests, ready to step into a lavish ceremony worth nearly $500,000. Paige sat inside her car for a moment, drawing in a long breath before stepping out. She didn't want attention. She didn't want trouble. She only wanted to see from afar and go. But after only a few steps, her entire world collapsed. There, at the main gate, mounted on the elegant stone wall decorated with flowers and ribbons, hung a massive banner. And at the very center of it, enlarged to an unmistakable scale, was Paige's own ID photo. Beneath it, in bold red lettering, were the words that froze her in place. Trash not allowed. Do not let this person in. Rak Kong Duok Byuk Vao. Paige felt her feet root themselves to the earth. In that moment, she couldn't believe what she was seeing was real. Years of distance, years of wounds she thought had reached their limit. Yet her family had found new depths to sink to, darker and sharper than anything she could have imagined. Standing beside that humiliating banner was her mother, accompanied by several relatives. And what hurt Paige most wasn't the banner. It was the look in her mother's eyes. Calm, unbothered, as if she were reading a normal event announcement. Her father stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, wearing the same indifferent expression he always had whenever Paige had once begged for help and been dismissed. When they saw her, neither of them showed surprise or discomfort. Not a flicker of sympathy. Not a single explanation. It was as if they had planned to watch her humiliation unfold. Then Bailey, her sister, appeared. Dressed in a pristine white wedding gown, her makeup flawless, Bailey looked at her older sister with a cold, triumphant gaze. She walked up, her voice sharp as a blade. "What are you doing here? Did you really think you were allowed to step inside? Look at your Walmart outfit, look at your life. This is my wedding. There's no place here for trash." Each word hit Paige like a slap. She didn't argue. She didn't get angry. She was too used to her family's cruelty. But this, the banner with her face on it, crossed a line she never knew existed. Her mother stepped in. "Go home, Paige. Don't ruin your sister's big day." Bailey folded her arms, looking down at Paige as though at a stranger she wanted nothing to do with. "Just leave. And don't ever come back." Paige drew in a deep breath. No tears. No trembling. No reply. She simply stood there, looking at the people she had once loved with her whole heart, the people she had helped, supported, sacrificed her career and her life for. Now seeing her as nothing but an embarrassment, an unworthy presence. In the silence, she took out her phone. With a slow, steady motion, she photographed the banner, the perfect evidence for what was about to come. Then she opened her messages and sent a text to Cheyenne, her only true friend, and the attorney holding the wedding venue contract. "It's time. Do it." No one standing at the gate had any idea that with that short message, one of Napa's most extravagant weddings would be completely destroyed in less than 30 minutes. Paige turned away, walking back toward her old car. No shouting, no confrontation, no weakness. She left in silence. Yet that silence was the beginning of a storm the Wilson family would never see coming. As she drove away, she glanced once more at her rearview mirror. The banner reading "Trash Not Allowed" grew smaller and smaller, until it disappeared behind the luxurious entrance of Silverado Crest. And then, roughly 28 minutes later, All 380 guests were stopped at the entrance. Security locked the gates. The multi-$100,000 wedding was officially shut down. Paige's nightmare had ended. The Wilson family's nightmare had only just begun. Before her life plunged off a cliff, Paige had once stood in a place few people in their 20s ever reached. She had lived in a world of large numbers, multimillion-dollar contracts signed in glass conference rooms, business trips to Manhattan, Seattle, Chicago. She had been the pride of the entire Wilson family. A shining star they flaunted to everyone they knew. At 26, while her peers were still juggling student loans or searching for their first job, Paige had become the chief financial officer of a rapidly expanding chain of luxury restaurants across California. Her base salary hovered around $260,000, not including equity and performance bonuses. It was a position that stunned people, earned praise and envy. But for Paige, that success hadn't been luck. She had spent countless nights in the office, perfecting reports before deadlines. She had fought tooth and nail against seasoned, cunning partners to protect her company's interests. She proved herself day after day, because everyone assumed a young woman from an ordinary background couldn't possibly have the strength to manage the finances of a multimillion-dollar corporation. But Paige had done it, and done it so well that every critic went silent. And as Paige rose, her family changed with her. Her parents, strict, rigid people who rarely praised anything, began talking about her at every social gathering. They spoke of her salary, her responsibilities, her industry features in magazines. Without realizing it, they began treating her as a symbol of the family's worth, a perfect bragging card. But the one who benefited the most from Paige's success was Bailey. The younger sister Paige always believed she needed to protect. Through college, Bailey spent freely, traveling, indulging in luxuries her peers could never afford. Paige knew, and she wanted her sister to have a carefree youth. So Paige paid Bailey's tuition for 3 years, bought her a brand new Toyota, funded an expensive trip to Maui for her 20th birthday. Sometimes she sent extra money just for fun, even when her own salary wasn't that high yet. To Paige, this wasn't just sisterly duty. It was giving her sister a chance at the life she herself never had. To Bailey, it was nothing more than expected. Then Paige got married. A glamorous wedding in Pebble Beach, where sea breeze mixed with the scent of foliage to create a refined, almost cinematic atmosphere. She believed life would be peaceful from then on. Her husband was a successful businessman, polished, sweet-tongued, protective. The Wilson family gained yet another story to boast about. Our daughter married a very successful man. Her career is solid too. Had life stopped there, Paige might have remained the treasured jewel of the family. But everything began to crack in the second year of marriage. The house grew colder. Conversations dwindled. Her once reliable husband came home later and later, avoided her gaze, hid his phone whenever she approached. Paige tried to convince herself it was all just work stress. She wasn't the suspicious type, and she'd always believed that love was built on trust. But then one evening, while looking for a jacket in her husband's home office, she found a hotel key card hidden in a drawer. The date printed on it was the exact night he'd said he had to stay over to handle a project. Her entire world collapsed in a single heartbeat. When she confronted him, her husband shattered the polished persona he'd worn for years. He didn't apologize, didn't plead, didn't even pretend to regret it. Instead, he turned bitter and ruthless. The divorce became a brutal war, where he deliberately fabricated false financial accusations to drag Paige's company into an investigation. In the world of finance, a single suspicion is enough to end a career. Even though the final conclusion cleared Paige of all wrongdoing, the stain was more than enough to destroy her reputation. She lost her job, lost her shares, lost her income, lost the future she had poured everything into building. The worst part was that during that entire time her family, the same people who had once basked in her success, slowly withdrew, keeping their distance because they didn't want their image dragged into it. Her mother started avoiding any mention of Paige. Her father refused to talk whenever she came home. Bailey was busy with parties, social events, and never seemed to care that her sister was tumbling into the deepest pit of her life. Paige packed her things by herself, moved into a small apartment, cut down her expenses, and clung to whatever temporary work she could find. But day after day, Every door in the finance world slammed shut in her face. No one wanted to hire someone who had once been under investigation, even if the final verdict cleared her name. In the end, she accepted a night shift at Walmart, a job she had once never imagined her life would touch. But at least it let her pay the rent, buy food, and survive. And in those bleak months, Paige finally faced something she had always refused to acknowledge. Her family only loved her when she was something they could show off. The moment she failed, she became a burden to be cut away. From pride to disgrace, all in the span of a single year. But that very desperation quietly forged Paige into someone new. Calmer, more grounded, harder than before. And she had no idea that those dark days would become the foundation that would allow her to stand up again, to confront, and eventually end her family's cruelty. After the divorce and the collapse of her career, Paige entered a darkness so deep that even her previous pains seemed small in comparison. When she'd been in a leadership position, she had believed her strength lay in numbers, in financial decisions, in contracts where a single nod from her could bring in millions in revenue. But it turned out her true strength, the thing that kept her standing after everything fell apart, wasn't any of that. It was her capacity to endure, to persist, to keep walking forward even when no one was on her side anymore. 3 months after Paige left her old corporation, rumors about the financial misconduct investigation spread through the industry faster than she could defend herself. Job interviews, once a stage where she effortlessly held the upper hand, became interrogations filled with suspicion and probing stares. All the legal paperwork said she had done nothing wrong, but that didn't matter. In finance, a single smudge on your record can bring your entire career crashing down. Paige sent out more than 20 applications. None of them replied. She called a few old contacts in the industry. Their replies were reluctant at best. The company's really sorry, but your current situation worries them. Or sometimes, my advice? You should probably switch to another field. Switch fields, it sounded easy enough. But no one wanted to hire a 26-year-old former CFO who'd lost her job in a scandal, even if she'd been exonerated. And so Paige was slowly pushed out of the glass offices lit late into the night where she'd spent her youth, and into a place she'd once never imagined stepping into. Walmart. Night shift. There was nothing shameful about the work itself, but the gap between her new reality and her old life made Paige feel like she'd become a shadow of someone else. She stocked shelves, stuck price labels, pushed heavy boxes into the storage room, tasks so repetitive they numbed her. She watched the clock crawl from hour to hour, listened to the same outdated playlist looping over the store speakers, and felt a dull ache run down her spine as her shift ended at 4 in the morning. Once she had signed contracts worth millions. Now she was being paid less than a week's tips at the very restaurants she had once helped manage. But Paige didn't collapse. She had never been the type to surrender easily. Even so, what pushed her closest to the edge wasn't her career. It was her family. When she lost her job, when everything fell apart, Paige thought her parents would at least ask how she was, or give her a small word of comfort. Instead, all she got was silence. Her mother said, "You should really take better care of your image. People are talking." There was no compassion in her voice, only fear of being dragged down. Her father was even more direct. "Your mother and I are not responsible for the consequences of your marriage." And Bailey, the sister Paige had supported through tuition, trips, everything, didn't even bother to text and ask if she was okay. Instead, Bailey continued the comfortable life Paige had helped build, checking in at cocktail parties, wearing the dresses Paige had once bought her, and completely erasing her sister's existence. Once Paige tried calling, Bailey only said, "I'm really busy, don't bother me. My friends already know about your situation. It's embarrassing as hell." Then Bailey blocked her number. In the days that followed, things only got worse. Her mother began slowly removing family photos from Facebook. Any picture with Paige in it disappeared. Paige stopped being invited to family gatherings. When a few relatives asked why, her mother just said, "She doesn't really fit the family atmosphere anymore." Every time Paige heard those words, it felt like dying all over again. She had once believed family love was the one thing that never disappears. But in the Wilson family, love only existed as long as she remained an achievement they could brag about. One night, in her dim little apartment, Paige sat on the living room floor staring at an unpaid electric bill. For the first time she felt real fear, fear of the future, fear of being alone, fear that she might not have a place to go tomorrow. She cried, not loud, wrenching sobs, but a silent kind of crying that choked her, as if all the pain accumulated over months had finally found a crack to escape through. And that same night, Paige understood one thing. She had lost her career. But the cruelest loss of all was losing her family. From someone they'd once held up as a symbol of pride, she had become a shadow they needed to avoid. She was erased from conversations, from photos, from gatherings, as if Paige had never existed. But in that period, slowly another Paige was taking shape. Harder, quieter, colder toward anyone who had ever treated her like a decorative trophy for the family's reputation. She didn't know that this pain would eventually become the fuel for an act that would force the entire Wilson family to pay. Not through violence, not through rage, but through the very law and choices they themselves had made. The silence they gave Paige would be the very thing that destroyed them. As for Paige, even at rock bottom, her story wasn't over. The darkness was only beginning. But it was from that darkness that she would eventually find her way back, stronger than anything they had ever known. 2 years after the darkest period of her life, Paige began to learn how to live quietly. No more late nights over financial reports. No more board meetings. No more tense calls from partners. Instead, there were shifts that dragged on until 4 in the morning at Walmart, simple meals, and days that passed as if no one in the world remembered she existed. But that quiet life, small and humble as it was enough for Paige to tell herself she was slowly finding her footing again. Until one September evening, when her phone began vibrating non-stop. A familiar number, one she hadn't seen in a very long time. Bailey, the name of the sister who had blocked her, avoided her as if she were some kind of contagion. The sister who had climbed onto a pedestal built from Paige's sacrifices. The sister who had vanished from Paige's life as if they had never been family at all. Paige's chest tightened. She stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure whether she should answer. But then she realized people sometimes still cling to hope, even when that hope is absurdly fragile. Maybe Bailey wanted to apologize. Maybe her family had realized their mistakes. Maybe, even if only a sliver remained, there was still some trace of sisterhood left. Paige tapped the screen. Bailey. On the other end, frantic breathing mixed with muffled sobs. 1 second was enough for Paige to understand. The beautiful, proud sister who always put herself above everything was in trouble. Sister. I'm in trouble. You have to help me. Bailey choked out, her trembling voice sounding like disaster was seconds away. Paige frowned. What happened? And then Bailey began to explain, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Bailey had just gotten engaged to the son of the Harper family, a wealthy, influential dynasty in real estate. They wanted a lavish wedding in Napa, in true high society fashion. But the Harpers would only accept one venue, Silverado Crest, famous for being extremely hard to book, outrageously expensive, and reserved only for clients deemed appropriate. Bailey continued, the Harpers already picked the date. I just need to pay the deposit, $148,000. But my account got temporarily frozen. Sis, I'll pay you back double. I swear. I just need you to book it under your name. Please. 2 years of silence. 2 years of treating Paige like a stranger. And now Bailey called only because she needed money. Paige said nothing for a long time. She could hear her sister sniffling, acting as though Paige were the only hope she had left. I know only you can help me. Mom and Dad don't have enough. I'm begging you. That sentence twisted like a knife in Paige's chest. Only you can help me. Where were they when Paige lost everything? When she had no one left, what did they do? She already knew the answer. And because she knew it so clearly, Paige understood better than anyone that this call wasn't born from love, but from Bailey's fear of failure. Paige didn't promise anything. She only said, let me see what I can do. Wait for my message. She hung up. The small room fell silent again, with nothing but the soft whir of the ceiling fan. But in that silence, a new decision was beginning to form. A few weeks before Bailey's call, Paige had received a notice from the family attorney. Her grandmother had passed away, leaving Paige an inheritance of $180,000, money her grandmother had quietly saved over many years and placed into a trust exclusively for her. No one knew about that fund, not even the Wilson family. Her grandmother had been the only person who ever took Paige's side, who had once whispered, "You're the only one in this family whose heart is in the right place." Now she was gone, but her gift arrived at the most pivotal moment of Paige's life. Paige thought for a long time, weighed every possibility, and finally she chose something bold. A choice that would one day force the entire Wilson family to face the consequences of their cruelty. Paige contacted Silverado Crest and booked the exact wedding date Bailey wanted. She paid the $148,000 deposit using her grandmother's inheritance, but she signed the contract under her own name, not Bailey's. And in that contract was a small but extremely important clause that most people never paid attention to. The dignity clause. According to it, if the event host, Paige, was severely insulted or publicly humiliated during the ceremony, the venue had the right to cancel the event immediately without refund. Paige read that clause at least 10 times. Then she called Cheyenne, her best friend and the only lawyer who had stood by her throughout the last 2 years. "Che, I'm sending you the contract. Keep everything safe." Cheyenne understood instantly. "Paige, are you sure?" Paige answered with only 5 words. "I'm doing this for me." After transferring the money and submitting the documents, Paige informed Bailey that the date had been secured. But a few days later, Bailey's tone changed completely. No more sobbing gratitude. No more promises of "I'll pay double." Instead, silence. Unread messages. Ignored calls. Paige went online and saw Bailey posting photos of herself trying on wedding dresses, posing with their mother, father, relatives. Paige wasn't in any of them. No one acknowledged her contribution. No one mentioned her at all. The next day, Paige received a call from her mother. Her mother said, "The Harper family wants everything to be perfect. They think you don't fit the atmosphere of the event. It's best if you don't come." Paige asked, "I used Grandma's inheritance to secure that reservation. Does that mean nothing?" Her mother paused for one cold second, then replied, "Money has nothing to do with this. If you show up, the Harpers will get the wrong idea about our family." That was the moment Paige understood more clearly than ever. They didn't need her. They never had. They only needed her money. And because of that, for the first time in her life, Paige felt she no longer owed them anything. When Paige transferred $148,000 for the wedding reservation, she wasn't thinking about revenge. At that time, she didn't have the strength left to feel anger. But when her family told her she wasn't allowed to attend the wedding she paid for, something inside her broke. Not loudly, not explosively, but sharply, cleanly, like the edge of a freshly honed blade. She didn't need their love, but she would not allow them to trample her dignity ever again. And the dignity clause, that one overlooked line in the contract, appeared before Paige as an opportunity too clear to ignore. If during the ceremony Paige was insulted or treated unjustly in a way that harmed her dignity, Silverado Crest had the right to cancel the wedding immediately and keep the entire payment. No one in her family knew that clause existed. No one knew the contract was under Paige's name. No one knew she held full authority over the entire event. She didn't need to do anything wrong. She only needed to let them do what they'd always done. Time passed as if even the air itself was vibrating, waiting. Bailey and her mother grew busier each day with dress fittings, pre-wedding parties, and endless preparations. They didn't give Paige a single schedule, not even a symbolic invitation. Paige simply watched from afar. Not angry, not resentful, just silent, like the darkness behind a candle about to burn out. Quiet but still there. One evening Cheyenne called her. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Paige was silent for a moment before replying. "They think I'm invisible. I'm just letting them realize their own mistake." Cheyenne didn't say more. She understood Paige was past the stage of pain. Now she was in the stage of clarity. It was a radiant golden day. The sky so clear it looked like it was blessing the union of 2 wealthy families. Silverado Crest gleamed in full splendor, shining like a living painting. Paige arrived right on time. Not to attend, but to observe. She wore a simple black dress. Elegant, understated, impossible to dismiss. She stood at the edge of the grounds, several dozen meters from the main ceremony area, watching the lively scene unfold. The Harper family arrived in full force, elegant, polished, exactly the sort of perfection her mother obsessed over. The Wilsons were ecstatic, as if they were attending the event of a lifetime. No one noticed Paige. She didn't mind. She was simply waiting. Things began when she stepped closer to the floral arch to take a look. The one Bailey had bragged online was more expensive than renting an apartment for a month. Her mother spotted her first. Her expression momentarily faltered before snapping into her usual cold composure. She hurried toward Paige with a pleasant smile plastered on, one used solely for preserving appearances. She muttered through clenched teeth, "What are you doing here? Bailey doesn't want you showing up." Paige replied calmly, "I'm just here to watch." Her mother grabbed Paige's wrist tightly. "You'll make the Harpers think our family has no class. Leave before anyone sees you." And at that moment Bailey appeared. In her white wedding gown she looked angelic, until she opened her mouth. Speaking loud enough for several nearby guests to hear, Bailey said, "Please just go home. I don't want anyone thinking you're connected to the Harper family." The whole atmosphere seemed to falter for a beat. Paige looked straight into her sister's eyes. "You forget I'm the one who reserved this venue for you?" Bailey curled her lip, her voice dripping contempt. "Reserved? You? Don't make me laugh. The Harpers know Mom paid for it. Don't embarrass me more than you already have." Several guests began glancing in their direction. Her mother, alarmed at the thought of losing face, hissed sharply, "You've shamed me enough. You have no right to be here. Leave now." Paige remained still. Not angry. Not reactive. She simply stepped aside, opened her phone and dialed one number. The manager of Silverado Crest. "Hello, this is Paige Wilson, the host of today's event." Her voice was clear, steady. The manager answered immediately. "Yes, Ms. Wilson. We are ready for your instructions." Her mother and Bailey froze, as if the ground beneath them had collapsed. Paige continued, her tone calm. "I have just been severely insulted by my own family at the wedding for which I signed the contract and paid in full. I would like to cancel the event under the dignity clause." A brief pause, then the manager replied, "Of course, Ms. Wilson. We will cancel it immediately." Everything unfolded within 1 minute. Staff members began folding tables, removing linens, turning off the music. The Harpers were bewildered. Guests looked around in confusion. Her mother went pale as if witnessing a catastrophe. Bailey screamed, "Are you insane? You just destroyed my wedding." Paige looked at her, serene as still water. "No. I protected my dignity. Something this family has never done for me." Bailey burst into sobs. Her mother trembled violently. Her father stood like a statue, speechless. As for Paige, in that moment she felt no triumph, only relief. A lightness so profound it felt like a massive stone she'd carried for years had finally been lifted. Paige turned and walked away from Silverado Crest. She didn't look back. She didn't hesitate. She owed them nothing anymore. No love. No filial duty. No responsibility. She had returned to the Wilson family exactly what they'd given her. No more, no less, using the very rules they had taken for granted. And with that step, Paige walked out of their lives. No longer the victim. No longer the shadow. But herself. Free, strong, and more at peace than ever before. News of Bailey's wedding being canceled during the ceremony itself spread through Napa like wildfire. Silverado Crest was a renowned venue among the wealthy, and in more than 2 decades of operation, a wedding had never been abruptly terminated. The incident left the entire guest list, mostly influential families, standing as first-hand witnesses, ensuring the story circulated across the city within hours. By the end of the day, everyone knew 2 things. Paige Wilson was the sole contract holder for the wedding, and the event was canceled because Paige had been publicly humiliated by her own family, violating the dignity clause. From that moment the consequences began. The Harper family was the type that never tolerated scandal, not even the smallest one. They had chosen Bailey thinking she was clean, graceful, and free of messy history. But once they learned the truth, that Bailey and the Wilsons had relied entirely on Paige to finance the wedding, and then treated her so badly the venue exercised its right to cancel, the Harpers saw it as a glaring red flag. That same evening, before Bailey even managed to change out of her wedding gown, Her fiancé, Andrew Harper, ended it with a single sentence. I don't want a family like that becoming part of mine. No apology. No sympathy. Bailey collapsed onto the floor, sobbing until she could no longer breathe properly. But Andrew simply walked away, like she had never existed. In a single day, Bailey's glamorous future crumbled into a bottomless abyss. Paige's mother, who valued reputation above everything, became the center of gossip among the upper-class community. Her friends whispered, she let her own daughter ruin the wedding. There must be something wrong with that family. They treated Paige so badly they got sued. Her father, a man who had long prided himself on having a model family, began receiving questions from his superiors. Some partners avoided him entirely, unwilling to associate with a family scandal. The reputation they had built by walking over Paige was evaporating before their eyes. Inside the Wilson home, dinners turned into silent battlegrounds. The mother blamed Bailey for insulting Paige in public. Bailey blamed her mother for not stopping Paige. The father blamed them both for embarrassing him. But none of them asked, what had driven Paige to do what she did? Because in that family, no one had ever tried to put themselves in her shoes. Bailey tries to reconnect. Bailey called Paige that very night. She called nonstop 5 times, then 10, then 20. Paige didn't answer. When Bailey turned to texting, the tone shifted rapidly. From begging, sis please, I need to talk to you, to blaming, why would you do that? You ruined my life, to anger, you're the most selfish person I know. And finally desperation, I have nothing left. Please. Paige read each message, but her hands did not tremble. 2 years ago these words might have shattered her. But now they were hollow. She quietly turned off notifications. No blocking. No replies. Just refusing to let those words invade her peace ever again. 3 days later, something happened that had never occurred before in Paige's life. Her parents showed up at the door of her small apartment. Her mother tried to look composed, but her eyes were swollen from lack of sleep. Her father stood stiff, stern but stripped of authority. Her mother spoke first, her voice unsteady. Paige, what you did was unforgivable. Paige held her gaze. Unforgivable? And what did you do when my career, my marriage, my life were destroyed? Her father stepped in. Regardless of what happened, you should behave properly. Even if the family was wrong, you shouldn't have ruined the wedding. Paige asked. They told me I made the family lose value. Is that not enough? Or should I have stayed silent while being humiliated again? Her mother took a sharp breath. We're family. Paige smiled, a sad smile but free of pain. Family? When I needed everyone the most, no one looked my way. Now that you need me, why should I come back? Her parents stood frozen. There was nothing they could say. Paige closed the door. Gently. Not angrily. But with finality. That was the last time she saw them for many months. Since the day she walked out of Silverado Crest, Paige felt lighter. Not because she had taken revenge, but because she had drawn a boundary between family and harm, between dignity and submission, between the person she once was and the woman she was becoming. Cheyenne suggested Paige join a nonprofit project helping young women who had been laid off or trapped in financial abuse rebuild their lives. She said, you have a story, and you have experience. You can help more people than you think. Paige hesitated. But then, remembering the last 2 years being abandoned, degraded, erased, she knew no one understood those girls better than she did. So Paige agreed. The project grew faster than they expected. With her financial expertise, Paige built a secure support system that helped over 60 women in the first year regain stability. Her workshops were always full. Some women cried hearing her story because they saw themselves in it. And for the first time in a long time, Paige felt something money could never buy. Purpose. Months after the canceled wedding, Bailey and the parents tried contacting her again. But Paige didn't respond. Not out of hatred, but because she knew some chapters must close forever. She didn't hate them. She didn't wish suffering upon them. She simply refused to let them harm her again. And that, at last, was true freedom. Paige realized her life had never fallen apart. It had merely changed direction. From the spotlight of the finance world to a quieter, more meaningful path. From a girl who lived to please others to a woman who lived true to herself. And when Paige looked toward the future, she no longer saw darkness. She saw light, a light she had kindled for her own life.